Assalamu alaikum and good morning. Welcome once again to the online session with the same topic that is to be continued, which is literary terms. So this is the second part of that lecture. Please open your exercise booklet, page number 93 and 94. And one clarification, my dear student, that some of these terms might be different from the books, but I believe that these are very much important in English language that you have to get to know. So the next one is irony. Irony is when a statement is used to express an opposite meaning than the one literally expressed by it. There are three types of irony in literature. How many kinds? Three types. Three types of irony. The first one is called verbal irony. So one of them is verbal irony. Verbal means spoken. When someone says something but means the opposite, it's similar to sarcasm. You say one thing but you mean the opposite, you mean totally different from your spoken message or language. The second one, we have situational irony. By situational irony means when something happens that's the opposite of what was expected or intended to happen. So you expect one thing and happen another thing, the opposite. That's called situational irony. The third type of irony is called dramatic irony. So dramatic irony means when the audience is aware of the true intentions or outcomes. Outcome means result, while the characters are not. As a result, certain actions and or events take on different meanings for the audience than they do for the characters involved. So it means the characters in the drama or in the movie, they do not know, while the audience know. So that's called dramatic irony. We have example for all these three types. The first example for the verbal irony. One example of this type of irony can be found in Edgar Allan's Poe's The Cask of Amontillado. In this short story, a man named Montresor plans to get revenge on another man named Fortunato, or Fortunato from fortune. As they toast, it means when they eat, Montresor says, "And I, Fortunato, I drink to your long life." So one man say to another on dinner or lunch or whatsoever they were there together. This statement is ironic because we, the readers, already know by this point that Montresor plans to kill Fortunato. So he plans to kill him while he says in front of him that I, Fortunato, I drink to your long life. So this called, the opposite of what he meant. We have for the next example for the situational irony. For example, a girl wakes up late for school and quickly rushes to get there. As soon as she arrives, though, she realizes that it's Saturday and there is no school. So there's a situational irony that if you do not know that it's Friday or Saturday, and or your parents, if they don't know and they just send you to the school while it's off, it's called situational irony. That was an example. The third example for the dramatic irony from William Shakespeare's famous drama that is called Romeo and Juliet. Romeo commits suicide in order to be with Juliet. However, the audience, unlike poor Romeo, knows that Juliet is not actually dead, just asleep. So Romeo thought, if you have watched, or if you would come across to get a chance to watch that drama or movie or read, so in that one, when Romeo saw that Juliet died while she was not dead, but just asleep, so he suicided while the audience knew, and the character they don't know. So that was an example of dramatic irony. The next literary terms or figure of speech, or we can also call it rhetorical device, that is called juxtaposition. So what does mean by juxtaposition is the comparing and contrasting of two or more different, usually opposite ideas, characters, objects, etc. This literary device is often used to help create a clearer picture of the characteristic of one object or idea by comparing it with those of another. So it's comparing with the opposite one, something, it might be a character or object or ideas. So when you look at the example, so it will be further clearer. Example: one of the most famous literary example of juxtaposition is the opening passage from the Charles Dickens novel. This is a very famous novel from Charles Dickens, an English writer, A Tale of Two Cities. So when he opened, these are the beginning lines. It was the best of time, it was the worst of time. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. Now you can see parallel, it was totally opposite. And the writer used this device in order to capture the reader's mind from the beginning, that these are two contradictory example of juxtaposition, because it enhances the grip of the writer over the readers. So it's just like a hook, it works like a hook from the beginning. The writer has a power and control upon their minds. Metonym. The next one is metonym. A metonym is when a related word or phrase is substituted for the actual thing to which it's referring. This device is usually used for poetic or rhetorical effect. So if, for example, you would further find it in a clarified form. Example: the pen is mightier than the sword. This statement which is very famous, which was coined by Edward Bulwer Lytton in 1939, contained two examples of metonym. The pen refers to the written word, and the sword refers to the military or military force violence. So it's very famous that pen is mightier than the sword. It means that pen is more powerful than any military or military force like gun. So we can bring a change through pen, through education, through literacy, through knowledge, not through violence. So that's a very famous one. The next one, oxymoron. So oxymoron is a combination of two words that together express a contradictory meaning. This device is often used for emphasis, for humor, to create tension, or to illustrate a paradox. See next entry for more information on paradoxes. When we read the paradox, it will be further clarified and illustrated. But oxymoron means two words, combination of two words which express contradictory meaning, the opposite meaning. Example: deafening silence. So silence is quietude, and deafening silence. So by deafening mean what? Something which is very loud. So deafening silence, total opposite words. Organized chaos. So chaos is something which is, is noise or commotion, and organized chaos. So total opposite word, these two. Cruelly kind. So cruel is on one dimension and kind is another, just like a east and west, you just combine. Insanely logical. So logical, something organized, and something which, and insanely is crazy. So these kind of words is called oxymoron, which express contradictory and totally opposite idea or meaning to one another. Now coming to the paradox. A paradox is a statement that appears illogical or self-contradictory, but upon investigation might actually be true or plausible. So paradox, it would seem to you illogical and contradictory. It means it would not appeal to your mind. It's true, but it would have the entirely the different dimension. What does it refer to? Note that a paradox is different from the oxymoron. So in oxymoron and paradox, the difference is that paradox is entire phrase or sentence, whereas in oxymoron is a combination of just two words. So oxymoron, two words, just a combination, and paradox is complete sentence. That is the difference between the two. Example: here is a famous paradoxical sentence. In the inverted commas, under inverted commas, you can see this statement is false. If the statement is true, then it isn't actually false, as it suggests. But if it's false, then the statement is true. Thus, this statement is a paradox because it is both true and false at the same time. It's related to logic, but actually it means when someone says this statement is false, he would mean either the opposite of what he is saying. He could mean that it's true, but he could also mean that it's false. So it can both be true and false. According to the meaning and situation, you would come to know during that what does he mean when someone is having participation in that discussion or that thing from the beginning. Now coming to homework, dear student, study the following pages as your homework, pages 93 and 94. Thank you very much. Have a safer and secure day. Salam. Assalamu alaikum and good morning. Welcome to the online session once again with the same topic, but with a new dimension of literary genres. So before we were discussing literary terms, and now literary genres. So the same pages you would find 92 from your exercise booklet, 93, 94. So what is a literary genre? A genre is a particular style or type of writing. So genre means particular style or type of writing. That is the definition of genre. Now we have most common genres, two broader categories: fiction and non-fiction. In fiction, we have fables, folk tales, fairy tales, fantasy, mystery, myth, legend, historical fiction, realistic fiction, and science fiction. Other types of writing, also we have drama and poetry. So in today's class, inshallah, we would discuss about fiction, and in the next class we would discuss non-fiction. So fiction, by fiction mean writing that tells about imaginary people and events. Stories that are made up. It means that those stories are not real. So they're called fiction. Imaginary, from your imagination. Among those imaginary stories, we have fantasy. One of them is called fantasy. So what does mean by fantasy? In this type of story, the author has created a magical world where anything is possible. Fantasy may include magical beings, talking animals, or other impossibilities. You can see like Harry Potter.
One ring to rule them all. One ring to find them. One ring to bring them all.
Like you might have watched Lord of the Rings in the form of the movie Lord of the Rings. Harry Potter is also in the book and the movie. The second type of fictional story, we have historical fiction. By historical fiction, we mean stories with fictional characters and events in a historical setting. The story takes the reader back to a particular time period where they learn about the everyday life of a person. The character may interact with actual historical characters, but usually the main character is not based on a real person. So the story might be a real one, but the characters and setting would not be real. That's called historical fiction. Now, after that, we have science fiction. Stories based on real or imagined invention, space travel, or life in other worlds, usually set in the future. It often explores the unknown. So it's called science fiction. And in science fiction, you might be well aware of these kind: Star Wars, Star Trek, and other one. So these are science fiction. Now after that we have horror and mystery. So by horror and mystery, fiction means horror is fiction in which events evoke a feeling of fright in both the characters and the reader. Mystery is fiction dealing with the solution of a crime or the unraveling of secrets. It means that it creates anxiety, fear, and you get scared, not only the reader but also the character also, and it just exposes one event after another to unravel, to expose, and goes to the main setting or the main problem or conflict within the story. So horror and mystery, it's unfolding one event after another, so there might be more than one conflict. The next one, we have realistic fiction. By realistic fiction, stories that could actually happen in real life. The setting is realistic, the characters speak and act like real people, the story describes real life problems and events. So realistic fiction means it can happen. It could have been happen, it can happen, and it would happen in real life. So that's why it presents a sort of realistic touch in characters and the way they talk and the way they behave. So from everyday life, these stories, real life problems. And after that we have Fable. Fable is a short story, usually with animal characters, that teach a lesson about what is important in life. Aesop's fables and these kind of fable. So the characters in the form of animals, but gives a moral lesson. It does have a moral lesson at the end of each story. And we have in cartoons and this kind of stories. Next one is we have folk tale. Folk tale, this kind of story told generation to generation, usually by word of mouth, sometimes different version in different cultures. Original storyteller is unknown, can involve animals, wishes, magic, trickery, and often the number 3. Now here you can see folktale, it's just spoken transmission of stories in the culture, in the society, from one generation to another generation, is transmit. And people know that, okay, my father told me like this, and my father told me that his father told. So this kind of stories. The next one we have myths. So myths are early people's way to explain the universe. Many gods and goddesses are present in myths. The gods and goddesses and heroes are superhuman in nature. Human emotions are experienced by the gods. Magic is often present in myths. Gods sometimes appear in disguised form. So in the past, the people would explain the universe or universal action by giving these fictional characters to their stories created in their own imagination. And like the animals having wings or strange kind of character. So the origin come from Greek mythology, which is one of the oldest mythology. So it's called myth. The next one is legend. Legend, a story handed down from the past that people tell as a true story, but sometimes the details are difficult to confirm. The person telling the story usually does not claim to be an eyewitness to the events, but heard it from someone who knows someone who heard it from someone who was really there. So it's kind of, I heard and he heard and she heard, and just keeps coming from generation to generation, and it is anonymous. So religion often contain a moral or a lesson and are told to uphold the values of the community. They often involve supernatural or religious elements. So it is a supernatural world beyond the dominion of this planet, so something which can happen. This is called legend. It's also not true story, but is fictional and imaginative story. Now here we have tall tale. So what does mean by tall tale? The very word signify the meaning. Tall tale. Tale means story. Tall mean tall. It means not true, exaggerated. Extraordinary person. The main character is better at things than an ordinary person. So he can do anything. Exaggeration makes something better, bigger than it really could be. An explanation explains how something came to be. So fairy tale. Now the story in fairy tales often begins with once upon a time, long ago, and it includes a good character and a bad character. It includes magic or something enchanted. So enchanted related to magic. Involves a problem that is solved and the good people live happily ever after. So that is a fairy tales in which you can see long time ago, once upon a time, and you would come across these fairy tales. Setting is often a forest or a castle. Homework. My dear students, revise all these literary genres and try to keep in mind all the relative terms and expressions with proper understanding related to the topic. Inshallah, we will continue in the next class and try to finish these literary terms and genres. Thank you very much.